Good day. It's that time again for Ask the Expert. Today we've got a very interesting conversation, which is we'll be focusing on pressure to provide work, money, and mental health. So today we've got our guest, as usual, our Fridays. This is our family meeting. I've got with me Mr. Neil Beerbaum. He's an internationally accredited high-performance leadership and life coach with more than 20 years experience. In corporate world, he works with leaders and teams in blue chip companies to improve performance through better communication and trust, and to develop the right mindset and for navigating uncertainty. As a life coach, he supports men to navigate stages of maturity. He holds, of course, a master's in philosophy in leadership, coaching, cum laude. So we're sitting with experts today from Stellenbosch Business School. He's also a long-term mediator, award-winning writer, business and economics graduate, husband, father, and friend, and keen social observer. Welcome, Neil.
Thank you, Tawako. Thanks for having me here today. It's
It's
great
an
to be back.
absolute pleasure. Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure to have you. So, Neil, getting to our conversation of today, as I've read your bio, as a life coach, in your experience that you have over these years. So, when we talk about the pressure to provide, what does that really mean from your perspective as a life coach? And where do you see this pressure showing up most often in people's lives?
Yeah, thank you. And so the pressure to provide really, you know, often it comes up financially. We think about it as a financial pressure to provide,
Mm,
and often forget about the fact that it's actually a broader canvas in terms of emotional support, friendship, relationship, and other elements of contribution that we make as well. We tend to focus on the financial, and for obvious
mm,
reasons, because as I often say, you can, when it comes to the financial thing, there's somebody knocking on your door every month. If your
mm,
friendship or your relationship is having trouble, often, well, that extends a little bit longer. You can take that extra week or, take as long as it needs to deal with. But when it comes to money, at the end of the
mm,
month, there's somebody knocking on your door. So we tend to focus on that. And in South Africa, as in many parts of the world, what we find, in terms of how it shows up, is single parent homes or single income households. And in
mm,
South Africa, and another one that I see quite a lot is what is termed the black tax. So I do a personality assessment in the corporate environment where we
mm,
debrief this personality profile. And one of the scores measures kind of where people are at on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like survival needs, affiliation needs, achievement needs, etc. And often you'll get, and I mean often, you'll get people who are top executives, like in the top 2% of
mm.
income, like really senior executives, and their drive to survive, their survival needs are quite high, out of proportion with what you would think. And so we investigated, and what comes up often is the fact that they're supporting a broader community. So, it's not just them and two children, but they're putting their niece and nephew through
Mm.
through university and supporting a sister and a brother and so on. And so that comes up quite a lot as well that I see in this country that is unique that we have. And then obviously, you know, cost of raising children has increased, education. When I was young, you needed like a cricket bat. These days, you need an iPad and a phone and everything else in the
Yeah.
world. Um,
Mm.
and so that's a factor. And then for men, particularly, I work a lot with men. It does link back into the money as well as competence and value. Men feel that they need to bring that as well. So yes, there's those are the aspects that I see.
Quite an interesting observation, and I truly appreciate the fact that you also linking it in our context to say when you mentioned black tax. So would you say that we are living on survival mode? And the next question that I want to ask is that do you think the idea of being a provider has changed over time? For example, when you mentioned the rising costs, job insecurity and even social media, is that pressure becoming heavier or just more visible?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I'm a student of history, so my
Mm,
form of relaxation is to read history.
okay.
And one of the things that I find fascinating about that is the fact that life has always been, a challenge. And there's that famous quote by Helen Keller who says, "Life is a daring adventure or nothing." And, so 1,000 years ago, if you were living in a European village and suddenly the Mongols swept through, well, that
Yeah.
was something you couldn't predict. And today it's
Mm,
AI. So, we kind of have unique challenges, but the themes are always the same. The themes have always been there. And some of the mistakes we make is to think that we have it, worse here. For example, like in South Africa, sure, we have some real challenges, but have you ever been to Hong Kong or China and seen how people live there?
mm,
At like there are places in Hong Kong where 6 or 8 people are living in a room the size of a shack, not 6 or 8, 14 or
sure.
20 people, and they have a tiny little bed, and it's
Mm,
and it's in a building with, 20, 30-story building with all of these little literal cages that they live in and
mm,
stuff like that. So we sometimes lose perspective on it here. Here we have the sunshine and the outdoors, and so there's always an upside and then the cost. And if you look throughout history, we also assume things like this, like we say, well, you know, and a broad sort of interpretation of the feminist viewpoint is that men always had it their way and could just go and find the jobs that they wanted. Well,
mm,
if you actually look at it, yes, men were going out to work, but they weren't choosing what they did that often. And your pecking order in the family decided what you would do. And a lot of those men were sent to be soldiers and sailors and work in the gold mines, where they were literally giving up their lives. And what gave them meaning, all of those guys, what made it okay for them was that they were providers. And
okay.
that was kind of a real sense of meaning for those men. So women would be providers in a different way, in a more in supporting the home, and then men traditionally in terms of bringing home the bacon or the food and the money and so on. And so providing has always been a very meaningful pursuit. There's one thing that's happened in society now, I would say, and that capitalism hasn't solved, is that at the top end, we've got people who are now looking much more at purpose. So what's my purpose? And I have to find my purpose. And they've lost the idea of being a provider, that purpose is being a provider, that,
Mm,
they disconnected from that. And it hasn't really made us happy. There's a lot of people drifting around aimlessly looking for their purpose, having forgotten where they can really find it.
mm,
And then at the other end is people who are
mm,
already stuck in cycles of poverty that are hard to escape, and they have no choice. There's no looking for purpose there. It's a daily grind. It's survival. So I think we have both of those, and some of the unique challenges that are being faced at the moment, are um, job insecurity, and particularly the technology.
mhm,
So, for example, I'm wondering what's going to happen. In America now, there are self-driving cars, robo-taxis in a number of the major cities that are now functioning. Well, what are we going to face, here in 10 years' time? Although I want to see those robo-taxis driving around with our taxi drivers and see if our taxi drivers will let them. They'll be like, you,
yeah.
they haven't programmed those robo-taxis for our taxi drivers when they get angry.
Yeah, that would be
So we'll
interesting.
see.
That would be an interesting angle to actually think about. I think would actually you mentioning that it would be, would have safer roads, I would believe, or some would argue otherwise,
Mm, mm,
So, and these are interesting very points that you are just raising. So men have always had, as men, we've always felt our sense of purpose is being provided,
mm,
So
mm,
with the challenges that we are facing right now, and you mentioned something interesting that maybe we are looking at things from our perspective or our conditions, but we've not seen other countries like you mentioned, Hong Kong, where I can imagine living 14 people in one room. Whereas if us, we had that information on our side, we'd say, but actually we're not worse off, but our conditions are not the same. So
mm,
would you say that speaks to us opening up our minds? And I think these conversations that we're having today is the great conversations that people, when they are tuning in now, they would see that all the challenges that we have as a country, it differs with every, continent or country. It's what you have and how do you work with it. So looking
Yeah.
at that, when that pressure builds, what are some of the early signs that someone might be struggling with it emotionally or mentally, even if they are still keeping it together on the outside? What are the symptoms that you see?
Yeah, I think the key thing for people to be aware of is when they are doing more or less of something that they would normally do without it
Mm,
being a specific goal. So, for example, you might be doing more drinking of alcohol or more watching of television or more exercising even. You might be exercising and that might just be an escape, a release, or doing less of. So you might do less exercising, less socializing, less sleeping,
mm,
more sleeping. So it's not any particular, yeah, it's the more or the less. And so if somebody gives you feedback, often it's our spouse or I've noticed that you're spending a lot more time watching television,
mm,
or you seem to be drinking more, or you're not participating, you're not seeing your friends that often, or your friends say to you, "We never see you." Any of those kind of things where somebody's giving you feedback that there's more or less of something going on, that's probably an indicator that you are stressed and you're using that as a coping mechanism, and it's time to start looking at where that's coming from.
mm, mm. So, when you mentioned that, when we look at, the challenge we have with substance abuse or substance use in the country, and when we're looking also at our prison system, there's more males in there. So, would you say maybe that there were warning signs, but people were not really listening to those warning signs to see actually that my patterns have changed. I'm using now drugs often as a man because of I'm feeling a pressure, maybe financial. And
Mm.
so when many people link their self-worth to financial success or career achievements, how does this mindset impact mental health, and how can we start to separate identity from income or job title?
Yeah, good question. And if I may, I believe that this affects men more than it does women. And my reason
Mm,
is that for women, success and achievement is a part of who they are.
mm,
So the woman will tend to still feel, my wife says as soon as there's a child, there's a file permanently open for each child in a woman's mind that never
okay.
closes, and they've got all of that, and then their job and whatever else they're doing. So women tend to spread their sense of self-worth across those things. The being a mother and being part of a community is as important as her job and her career. Whereas for men, it tends to be more singular. We tend to focus our self-worth on the provider thing, and particularly on our worth on our financial value or a number. We link it very strongly to a number. And
Mm,
so, um, and there's various reasons for that. We can get into it. I won't go into it now. Um, but because men do that, we tend to then, there's certain key things that men will tend to do then. Is the one is they will turn to nefarious business dealings in order to achieve the number. So if they're not getting it
mm,
legitimately, that's when they might join a Ponzi scheme or start a Ponzi scheme, take
mm,
unnecessary risks, make promises that they can't quite fulfill in order to, raise money for something, and then when that doesn't work out, the story gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and they get themselves into a bit of trouble with that. We kind of see that with guys who kind of blow up in their 50s, and we suddenly find that there's no substance behind all their promises. That's because they were trying to cover it up. And we find out that they've been swimming naked all along. The other thing,
mm,
as you've mentioned, is turning to drugs and alcohol and other forms of escape. And
mm,
so, I have a YouTube video and there's a talk that I give on the mental health mistakes that men make. And a lot of that revolves around men not seeking help or having the conversations that they need to have, where women are more willing to do that. If you do a women's group, for example, a women's empowerment weekend or a workshop or something, you'll get hundreds of women signing up for that. If you do one for men, you'll get like 6 or 8.
yeah.
And so
Mm,
men don't really tend to invest in that. And when we see men getting together, they'll tend to talk brave stuff like what's going well in my life. And every guy's fronting up and making like his life is better than the next guy. And so what that does is it ends up leaving each guy feeling like the problems they have are theirs alone and they're the only one, and there must be something wrong with them and that they need to fix them on their own. And that's where men get into a bit of trouble. So the thing that men need to do is to start recognizing that and sharing more deeply and honestly what's really going on for them, uh, in ways that that are acceptable for them. And then they discover they're not alone. And I think that's one of the key things. Um, and the other thing as well is to recognize that my role, my separate my role from my value or my worth from a number. So I'm not my paycheck, but about those other things. Something I like to say is, when at your funeral one day, your children and your friends are not going to say, "Damn it, I wish I had earned more money." They're gonna
Yeah,
think, they're gonna talk about all the things you did for them at an emotional level, at a support level, who you were as a person. And so if you can connect into that a little bit more about that's where your real value lies, that can help you tremendously.
sure. I'm learning a lot. I'm just so when you having this conversation, I'm like, what is it that maybe I'm still, as a young man growing up now, a father of two boys, what is it that I can instill, And you mentioned today at your funeral, whatever you have, I was watching a funny picture, on these socials that a man wanted to be buried with their car, all the things that you have, the house and the fancy cars. When you leave this world, they're not going to come along, they're going to stay behind. But people, when they
Mm.
talk about you, they talk about the impact that you've had, as a father, as a partner, even as a friend. So it's quite interesting when you mentioned that point. So when we talk about, because often from what I'm picking up from this conversation is that as men, we don't speak a lot and we try to overcompensate what we lack, within ourselves intrinsically, As we mentioned, someone blows up in their 50s, they now suddenly have been covering up, making stories, making these deals, but all to just be that provider or to be seen in community as important. What would you say, what could be the coping tools or techniques that you would recommend for someone who feels stuck, like they can't slow down because of so many people depend on them?
Um, yeah, I think there's the first and most important thing when people feel stuck in terms of dependency is to do an audit. And this leans strongly into the leadership coaching that I do, because chances are you are caught in a snowball effect and you've created some dependency. So like those people I talk about who are, the black tax and supporting many people. And often it's about, we create a sort of a learned helplessness. So people start to depend on us and we think that they can't survive without us. It's the same at a leadership level. Everybody thinks I have to solve the problems and I can't rely on the people in my team. Well, have you really tested that? And often what we teach leaders is when you let people sort the problems out themselves, you'll be surprised at how good they are at sorting themselves out. And you might actually be disappointed at how little they actually need you in the end when you really do that work. And it's
Mm,
the same with people who are, I call them the helper personality, the champion of the underdog personality, the
mm,
people who are supporting a lot of people. You create a learned dependency, and sometimes you need to unwind that. And you're probably getting that message from some people. Your wife might be saying, if it's a guy, or your spouse might be saying, do you really need to be supporting them as much as you do? Could you really let them sort that out? And so the
mm,
thing is then to do an audit and to step back and start to shift some responsibility back to those people and discover that, just how much they can actually do for themselves. And, I think that's one of the most important things. And you might be surprised at how much space you can create there for yourself. And then also, while you're doing that, there are smaller things that you can do, which is, setting some non-negotiable boundaries for yourself in terms of sleep, exercise, family time, like, block those out and be uncompromising on them. And then, some mindfulness, presencing and grounding exercise during the day, just to, during the day we get caught up in our head, all the worry and the concerns, to just presence and ground yourself. Some mindfulness techniques there that can help you just presence and ground yourself. Even 2 minutes, a 2-minute breathing exercise or meditation where you just get really present and calm can help break that cycle during the day as well.
So, I don't know if our audience is picking up what I'm learning, but I'm picking up from this conversation to say that as men, we need to stop living in our heads. I could be wrong. We live so much in our heads and we want to be the hero to everyone, but ourselves. In often times, when I get the opportunity to speak to other men, I've said to them, look, I've noticed that as men, we are good at taking care of things, but loving ourselves. You know,
Mm,
so and when you mention the word audit, we need to audit ourselves. We need to,
mm,
really, this is the conversation that's, I think, can go on for hours. What we're speaking about right now. I'm getting a wealth of information. I don't know about our audience. So you often speak about mental resilience and self-awareness. How can someone build that kind of resilience when they are constantly under pressure to perform or provide?
mm. Yeah, good question. The first thing I would say is to do the audits that we've just
Mm,
mentioned and then and set those boundaries for yourself and stick to them. And then another one is to kind of start your day with a routine where you maybe do some meditation, some reflecting, and some planning on what you need to do first. And here's another piece that I think is so valuable in terms of a practice. And the phrase I'll use is to recognize the value of completing things. So if you think
mm,
about it, a lot of the stress that occurs is because you've got all these open boxes in your mind, all the things that you haven't done. And when you complete something, it kind of goes away. It creates a little bit of clarity in your mind. But we don't often put a value on that. We think, oh, I need to rest some more. I need more rest. But we're not recognizing that what we really need is to complete these little things. And so what I mean by that is if you start your day and you
mm,
start your day with completing some small task that needs to be done, that is either a business task, a work task, but it might also be a personal one as well. Like you need to book some airline tickets, which means make a decision about, a trip that you've got to take and then book those tickets and get that out of the way. Sometimes that can
mm,
take a lot less. It can take 10 or 20 minutes. It might take you 40 minutes. Get that done first at the beginning of your day. Start your day, even if you have to get in a little early, get something like that done. If you think about that, what happens the rest of your day, you've got this sense of completion and a sense of
mm,
accomplishment, and and you bank that. And then the rest of your day can erupt into chaos, and you feel this, you've got that little bit of self-efficacy, self-control that you've built. Plus, you're getting stuff done that is now not dragging on your mind all day. So if you do that every single day, 20 work days and let's say 30 days of the month, that's 30 things completed that otherwise would be
mm,
sitting open, sitting open, sitting open. Instead of carrying 20, 30 things in your mind, you may be carrying three or four because you build up a momentum and you catch up with things. And this is one of the most effective things that can help a person in terms of mental clarity, resilience, and it
mm,
also energizes you. It gets you, there's a lot of secondary benefits in terms of developing self-efficacy and so on. So completing things. And so if you're going to do a task, you know, if you've got something to do, complete it. If you start something, complete it. And if you're not going to complete it, don't start it. And that does allow for breaking up tasks into small pieces. But if you sit
mm,
down, you're going to do something, don't sort of start and go, oh no, this is too much hassle, and then you leave it. All you're doing is creating another burden to carry around. Finish that task, even if everybody else has to wait. Finish the task, and you'll
mm,
be amazed at how much effectiveness you can build just from that one little thing. And the other thing as well that we often don't do is we don't
mm,
ask for the help that we need. So we expect other people to know and to see that we need help and to step up, and then we get upset when we don't. That also wastes an enormous amount of energy. The answer is to recognize what you need and ask for it. And yeah, those are two of the most effective things that I could think of that they require. So it's not, this is like proactive stuff. It's like taking
mm,
responsibility, taking action, but
mm,
the knock-on benefits are tremendous. Often we talk about self-care and nurturing. My solution is much more proactive, much more action-oriented, but you'll be amazed at how much benefit you get out of that. And then you can rest at the end.
mm.
You can have a little 20-minute tea break at the end of the day, but get stuff done.
Right. When you mentioned that, it's quite interesting that we do get those calls on the helplines where, our men reach out and say, look, my wife says I've got a drinking problem. but I never get things done in the house, but I work, I provide money. So when you mentioned that part that maybe as men we struggle with completing certain tasks, and
Yeah, yeah.
then we get cluttered, we get busy with other things, but we forget that other tasks have not been completed. So which is quite interesting when you mention it in that, context, you say we can actually achieve a lot. This just
Mm,
takes me back to, in the military days. They wake up in the morning, they do their bed, which is a simple task. But the purpose of them doing their bed is that when they go into war, they don't know whether they would have achieved the war, they would have won, or they would have been defeated. But when they come back, they'll find the room ready, prepared, in a clean state. So it's taking me back to that, your mindset. So to say that we need to start completing this task, and which is a good point that you're raising, Neil. I'm looking at our time, and I think we can spend hours, chatting about this
mm,
conversation. I think we need 2 hours, in more than that, 2 hours. So in just wrapping up, what is your message would you like to leave for anyone watching today who feels like they are carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders?
mm. Yeah, this is very important. I would say the core message is that you're not alone and that you're probably not doing as much wrong as you think you are. And if you have some deeper conversations with the people around you, people in similar situations, so men with other men, women with other women, and look more deeply into reality, like the examples I gave of, look at how people live overseas. You can see it in you watch a movie and you see, oh, look how these people live, and spend less time on social media, and together with and rather focus on what's important and what matters on the world around you. That will start to get you out of some of that spiral that we're in, which is self-blame and self-pity and so on.
Mm,
And and recognize as well from what I said about the completion and the asking what for help, is that you have more power to manage yourself in the situation than you think you do. And
mm,
your job is
mm,
to look for where those opportunities or leverage points are and to test them. So, if people are depending on you, see if you can turn that around a bit and get them to do stuff as well and get the support that you need, and start to create those boundaries in your life. You'll find that you have more power there than you think you do.
mm. Hey, no, I feel like I'm in a coaching session right now,
Yeah, good, good, good.
This is quite powerful. I've actually learned a lot, and I hope our viewers have learned as well. But in closing, the three messages that I'm picking up from our conversation is set boundaries, you're not alone, reach out, ask for help. And the last one, which is a major one, which when we're done with this conversation, I'm gonna do is complete your tasks. Finish your tasks. So these are the
Excellent.
powerful messages that I've picked up from our conversation. Thank you so much, Neil, for joining us today. And yeah, see you back also in the future, to have these more conversations. Maybe who knows, we'll come back again to add on this discussion.
Great. Yeah. Thanks so much, Suboko. I appreciate it. And I look
Thank you.
forward to chatting again.
Oh.
Excellent.